The Xianlan continent is a continent of cultivators, but there are also ordinary people here. Cultivation masters are people of the highest rank. Mortals work all their lives and spend all their energy on finding a way to cultivate. Someone's quiet footsteps were heard in the mountains. He was not a tall, plump young man sent there by his mother to practice and find himself a wife. No one accepted him, and only the immortality sect remained, whose brochure stated that a cookie or a piece of cake was required for joining. And so, after all his wanderings, the young man came across an old hut. Of course, he immediately thought that this sect was a scam and threw out all the leaflets. However, before he could take a step, someone grabbed him by the ankle and asked him not to leave. The young man looked in surprise at the man lying on the ground and asked who he was. He introduced himself as the head of the immortal sect, Wang Feng. He remembered how just 3 days ago he was a manga artist and couldn't sleep at night. Because of this, his soul was transferred to the cultivation world. Wang Feng appeared high in the sky and immediately flew to the ground. As he fell, he hit a noble old man in ancient robes flying on a sword. He immediately realized that this was a cultivation world, and he was upset that the old man, who had already become a cultivator, was so harmful. Before the man could come to his senses, a system window appeared in front of his eyes with a message. "Congratulations, you have arrived on the Xianlan continent and have been registered in the strong sect system." Wang Feng was happy. He finally became the chosen one in the world of cultivators, where he would definitely have divine power, skills, and weapons. But the system upset him because it was created for apprenticeship, creating your own sect and promotion. Hearing this, the man called the system stupid. The next message was more interesting. Sect leaders can receive rewards by inviting new disciples. Do you want to accept the quest? And of course, Wang couldn't help but agree. The system began to explain the task, the reward, the deadline, and the man became alarmed that something was about to start. But the instructions said to accept a student who would give all his money within 3 days. Standing in the middle of the forest, Wang shouted, waving his hands. "There is nothing, no strength, no techniques. How can I find a student for myself?" Immediately, a warning was received from the system. If the head of the sect does not find a disciple in time, he will be forcibly removed. This really scared the man. He didn't think the system would be so categorical. And these days, he was busy recruiting disciples so that he would not be removed. The time was running out. When this guy came, Wang immediately began to praise his physique and abilities, trying to lure him into his sect. But the guy looked at the man suspiciously, asking many questions. Which sect leader? Which disciple? It was immediately obvious that the immortal sect was just a hut, and Wang was dressed like a real rogue. Hugging the young man, the man began to prove. "A sect, like people, cannot be judged by appearances. I see that you are actually a very talented guy." These words almost made the boy cry. He couldn't believe that he could become a cultivator. The man snatched the leaflet from his hands, and he began to explain. "This sect is called the Immortal Sect because if you join it, you will become an immortal cultivator. Mountains of money, destroyed monsters, and a beautiful wife flashed in the guy's imagination. He had already prepared a bag of money, ready to join the sect. With a wide smile, Wang reached for the money, and then their hands met on the bag. Van wanted to take it, but they didn't let him and pulled him towards themselves. The young man was worried. "What if I don't become a cultivator?" The man tried to calm him down by saying that if that happened, he would return the money, find another sect, and introduce him to a girl. Doubts just didn't want to let the guy go. The man's lips still sported a false smile. The young man thought that since he was being so actively invited to join the sect, it meant that he was very talented. Only he decided to warn in advance. "I can't stand diets and training. I eat fish or meat for lunch. My clothes should be washed, and when I'm tired, I will rest." Wang was already so desperate that he was ready to provide everything. But he was irritated by this attitude, and if the man had not been in danger of dying, he would have sent the boy to an orphanage. Finally, the money fell into his palms, and the system announced, "Congratulations on your first disciple. You have now activated the sect system. Open the stats to see the rewards." Wang immediately went to see what rewards he had been given. However, suddenly, I felt the grip of little hands on my back. The happy young man hugged the man and said, "You treat me so well. Even my brother wasn't so kind. From this day on, I will call you Brother Wang Feng." But this only made the man angry, because he hadn't seen the reward yet. Having fallen to the ground, the hungry boy demanded that they arrange a banquet. But Van said that he would prepare everything, and he himself was going to run away from him. The man quietly entered his small hut and asked the system to open the characteristics panel to view the awards. Wang's stats were very poor. He had no cultivation, no physique, no bloodline. And his rewards were the ability to summon and the chance to play the lottery. The system explained that the ability to summon could be used to summon one of the powerful Celestials who would belong to the sect and train the followers. Hearing about the Celestials, the man remembered his first day on the Jinlan continent. On the second day, the system gave him a house with a thatched roof. Every day, Van lay there and thought about how he wanted to go home. However, now he used the rite of summoning and summoned the invincible Celestial. A small yellow window lit up in the sky. It grew larger and larger and someone's legs appeared from there. The rest of the unknown person's body followed suit, and the pillar of light struck the hut with all its force. Nearby, on a tree, lay a happy, plump young man. From the strong impact of the light, he fell from the branch thinking that an earthquake had occurred. There was no more light, but the guy was still shouting, "Save me! Help me!" Realizing that there was silence, he raised his head, wondering what had happened. He was surprised that the old hut did not collapse from such a blow. The worried young man rushed forward, throwing open the door. Breathing heavily, he raised his wounded face. There, near the window, Wang Feng was sitting quietly on a chair, drinking tea. The boy rushed to him asking what was happening. Wiping his mouth, the man replied, "I'm just relaxing and drinking tea." The boy pointed his finger at the window, where a man appeared among the lightning. "There's an apocalypse outside." He was very close to the house and was surrounded by shining magic. The Celestial was tall with long black and white hair. And then Yaguchin opened his eyes, dark as night. The teacher and the student came out to meet him, one beaming with joy and the other in panic. The celestial being stamped lightly and sank to the ground. All in the glow of magic, he walked forward. "This is it. The apocalypse you were talking about." Van was surprised, but the guy only cried and talked about the immortal monster. The man began to calm the shocked child in a whisper and told him that he was the patron of their sect. The boy could not believe it, because the master had never spoken about a person with a level of spirituality or piety before. Van thought, "It turns out there are levels in this world." Ye Guqin was a sword master in one of the novels. Is he really that strong here? The interested man asked the system to open Ye Guqin's stat panel. His characteristics read, Ye Guqin, a character from a novel, a master swordsman, lives in the South China Sea. A swordsman recognized as the god of the sword. Thus, the celestial being had the level of an emperor. Hearing this, the young man was truly frightened, because such masters are the most first-class warriors in the entire empire. Wang looked at him with a grin, thinking that the strong remained strong no matter where he was, and so the celestial being came closer to Wang Fei and froze. He folded his arms, bowed slightly and introduced himself, and the man asked him to be without formalities. The boy looked at their calm conversation and couldn't believe it. He had seen a lot of things over the years, but he had never seen an emperor-level master greet another person like that. The first thing the young man decided was that the head of this sect ruled over the deities. Meanwhile, Wang was bored with the dialogues he had learned from wuxia novels and decided to have his apprentice do it for him. He introduced Li Qing to Mr. Guqin, who bowed deeply in greeting. The man happily noticed how the boy became more docile after seeing the celestial being. Curious, he asked the system what the lottery was for, and it replied, "You can win a bloodline, a physique, and raise the level of the summoned celestial. The prize can be used by the sect leader or his disciple." Van was overjoyed and decided to try his luck as soon as possible. Now he ordered the system to play the lottery. A few seconds later, the system congratulated the man on obtaining 10% of Guqin's cultivation. When she asked if Wang wanted to give the power to the disciple, he, of course, refused, intending to keep it for himself. He then asked, "System, how much cultivation will I get by using 10% of Guqin?" And she said that the master would reach the early stage level of the introductory phase. But Wang didn't understand what that meant, and he decided to check the cultivation levels of the student, who was already trying his best to make friends with the celestial by sharing buns with him. Licking began to explain. Cultivation is divided into 10 levels: foundation creation, deep veins, spirit medium, wise general, introductory phase, aristocrat, wise monarch, wise ancient, wise saint, wise emperor. While Wang listened to him, the boy did not understand why the master asked him about this, and the man thought, the 5th level was not the top, but not the bottom either. It was not bad for someone who started from scratch, and so he pressed the power transformed into an orange circle to his chest, commanding the system to increase cultivation. A pillar of light immediately sparkled around his body, pushing Licking back, and Wang felt his level increasing with each passing second. It was an amazingly powerful force, but the man could not control it. From such power, even his clothes were torn, and the guy looked at it with admiration, realizing that the master was not immortal after all. Wang thought about it and decided to explain it as if he was simply demonstrating the strength of the introductory phase that Li King could achieve after a year of hard work. However, the young man did not believe that this was even possible unless the person was a genius. The boy hugged his teacher's legs tightly, who didn't even think about how powerful the introductory phase was, but smiled and said, "It's not for nothing that my sect is called immortal." Listen, crying, banged his head on the ground and said, "Karma has descended upon me because I was lucky enough to get into such a divine sect." Now he was going to cultivate diligently so that the teacher's efforts would not go to waste. But Wang did not say that it was up to chance. The wind was rustling around him and, closing his eyes, the man listened to it, feeling the power of the introductory phase. He heard drops of water hitting the ground, the scent of flowers and the rustle of birds' wings. Van could hear everything that was happening in the valley. High in the sky, a bird was indeed flying calmly. But then someone's foot, wearing a high-heeled boot, stepped on her. It was a girl with long black hair who stayed in the air by pushing off the bodies of birds. She had beautiful blue eyes which were highlighted by the blue dress of the sorceress. Of course, Wang immediately sensed the intruders. Guchen, standing next to him, admitted that she was quite a difficult cultivator. "Since the girl has decided to honor the immortal sect with her visit, why don't we greet her?" the man said, thinking that they should check her out since they don't know if she is an enemy or a friend. Elder Ye instantly grabbed the sword that was enveloped in an extraordinary power. She made it so sharp and long that it easily pierced the ground. Li King and Wang looked at this scene with admiration. Opening his eyes, the immortal was about to lower the heavenly guest to earth. The air current swirled around, gradually increasing in strength and even lifting stones from the ground. Frightened by such force, the guy fell to the ground, covering his head, and leaflets about the immortal clan flew out of his bag in the gusts of wind. With a swing of his sword, Guchen created a huge tornado. Someone screamed loudly over the field. It was Lyson who finally noticed that the tornado had carried away all the sect's flyers. The master was amazed by the cultivators' way of greeting each other. A rapidly spinning tornado almost caught up with a girl in the sky. She looked at this power in shock, and after some thought, she decided to act, stepping on the next bird. She waved her arms, trying to get around the tornado. However, something unexpected caught her eye. The girl immediately pulled the sword out of its sheath, and she aimed it right at the leaflet that was bothering her. However, the destruction of the sect's property angered Elder Ye, and he grabbed his blade again. This time, the immortal decided to pull out the sword from its sheath, which was burning with a bright light. His hair was flying in all directions, covering the blade behind his back. The strands were not cut, but only embraced the sword, also beginning to shine. And then Guchen swung his blade, cutting through the air. A gust of wind sent by the sword caught the sheet of paper, and having rounded the sword, he flew straight towards her. Not expecting a leaflet to hit her cheek, she closed her eye. The leaf stuck tightly to her face and she couldn't remove it with her hand. Without sight, there was no longer any way to stay in the air, and the girl flew down. She hit the ground with force in front of Li King and Wang's eyes. Thinking that she could now become an enemy, the man decided to send his student to check on the girl. She was lying nearby with a piece of paper on her face, and so the young man ran up to the lady asking if she was okay. Meanwhile, the elder's sword clicked into its sheath. The light gradually faded from his weapon and hair, together with force holding the paper on the guest's face. When she finally broke free, her face was one of insane rage. A frightened Litzen raised his hands, showing that he had nothing to do with it. The girl gritted her teeth and prepared to launch into an angry tirade. Throwing the leaflet on the ground with all her might, she exclaimed, "What kind of bastard scattered this garbage everywhere?" The guy ran away from her in horror, about to cry. He hid behind his teacher and he stroked his head, saying, "This is not trash, these are flyers of my sect." The girl unfolded the piece of paper crumpled in her fist in surprise. "This is the Divine Immortal Sect," she clarified, and Wang Feng replied that it was correct and introduced himself to her as the master of this sect. A new system message then appeared, congratulating the discovery of a genius. Wang looked at the new mission in shock. Accept 10 disciples. For her, they gave 10 calls and 10 lotteries. Such a reward made the man happy. After accepting Li King into the sect, he received Gucheng and the introductory phase, and this girl was much stronger. A happy Wang imagined how he would soar to the sky if he recruited her. Nothing came to the man's mind and he decided to act according to the situation. "Young lady, I realized at first glance that you have a unique talent," he began. Hearing this, Lycan thought irritably that the master was saying this to everyone he met. However, he was not allowed to finish speaking as his mouth was covered with a hand. Trying to get rid of the crying boy, Van tried to negotiate with her. but he understood that the girl moved through the air with the help of birds. This proved her incredible strength and knowledge. She probably had a lot of combat experience, and the tricks of the swindler might not work on her. The girl asked again, "You called yourself the master of the immortal sect." Softening, she asked, since the leaflet was talking about recruiting students, would she be suitable? Of course, Wang was immediately happy, because he didn't expect such a fairy to become a student. Noticing his happy mood, the system pointed out that he shouldn't rejoice too early, and if his candidate couldn't pay the entry fee, it didn't count. The system's many restrictions irritated the man terribly, but there was no choice and Van extended his hand forward. The rules of the divine sect state that an applicant must voluntarily give up all his money as an entrance fee, he said. Stepping forward, the girl grabbed his outstretched hand, starting to explain, "I left my home in a hurry and I don't have money with me. Can I pay the fee later?" The man felt sorry for her, and he would not have taken a penny if it were not for the demands of the system. So he had to say that these were the rules of the sect and they could not be broken. At that moment, Lyson thought how lucky he was, since the master was demanding money even from such a genius. However, suddenly people appeared behind the girl and a voice rang out. "Beauty, did you really think that you would be able to escape?" The man in front with the strange hairstyle and glowing eyes was apparently the main one among them, claiming, "Even your father couldn't protect you, do you think these monkeys can?" Stepping closer to Wang, the girl pulled out her blade. "Lingyun Yi, I am now a disciple of the immortal sect. How dare you behave like this in front of my master?" And the man smiled embarrassedly, thinking that it turned out that his prey already belonged to someone. Then Lingyun finally landed on the ground. He threatened to kill the people who stole their loot. And with a grin, he boasted about his slaves, who were of the level of a wise general. Wang began to think. There were 5 people at a level below him, and the leader's level was unknown. It seemed like it was dangerous to accept this student. Besides, the girl was trembling with horror. And then Litzen unexpectedly stepped forward. Laughing, he reassured his older sister, saying that the master could deal with them with one finger. His words made his enemies doubt their strength. And Wang was angry at Licking for getting him into trouble, because now if he lost, it would affect his mission. The girl looked at the man with hope, and she slammed her fist into her palm, kneeling down. Thanks to the master for his intervention and rescue. Van seemed confident as he reassured the beauty. "Don't worry, no one will touch you again." However, in his heart, he was incredibly worried that they were so eager to set him up. "What nonsense!" Lingyun exclaimed as he stepped forward and interrupted them. His men went on the attack and the Marquis added, "You dare to show courage before me. Let me remind you what death is." The sword was aimed straight at the frightened Van and he couldn't escape. But suddenly his pupils seemed to shift and his vision changed. Everything around was seen incredibly clearly, and even the blade that almost hit him slowed down. The man was surprised to realize how slow everything around him was and grabbed the tip of the sword, turning it and looking at it as if it were a mirror. It seemed like in this world he could easily crush someone one level lower, Van realized with a grin as he saw the girl attacking from behind in the reflection of the blade. Leaning forward, he avoided both attacks, allowing them to collide, even though the man had hoped that they would become his sparring partners. But Wang knew that if he fought them in front of the students, it would be a real disgrace. Therefore, the man surrounded by enemies called out to Ye Gucheng. The immortal was always ready to fight and had already raised his sword. And standing in front of the master, he began to easily scatter enemies as he moved forward. He quickly found himself in front of the Marquis, who could only scream in horror. Van slowly approached him. "Well, as you reminded me, in my opinion, everything didn't go according to plan for you," he gloated, pointing at the enemies lying there without strength. Proving his case, Leaking said, "See, the master didn't even have to intervene." And the girl was amazed at how this man defeated 5 of the wise general's level, who was considered above average. She wondered what phase this elder might be in to deal with them with one blow. Lingyun had only one choice left. Raising his hands, he slammed his fist into his palm. Bowing his head, the Marquis said, "Senior, you understand? I was unable to discern your greatness and spare me this time." Raising his cunning eyes, he was going to make his father, the Marquis in the Yaoji Empire, prepare a generous gift. This bribe angered Xiao Wu, but the girl didn't have time to say anything. Wang patted Guchen on the shoulder to encourage him, and he replied to Lin Yun with a smile. "I don't care who your father is, but if you dare to come here again, I will destroy you." The girl was surprised and delighted when she saw this. Licking also admired the master, telling him how strong he was and how he could destroy the Lin estate with a snap of his fingers. However, Xiao Wu understood how influential the Marcus family was and how unrivaled it was in the entire empire. Marquis Lin Tianxiong was at the level of an aristocrat and commanded an army of 500 people, where every soldier is at the level of a general and there are 10 more commanders in the introductory phase. The strength of this army was equal to an average sect, which is why they calmly committed their atrocities and it could only flee. However, the existence of Marquis Lin has no meaning to the immortal sect master. With the belief that perhaps he really could, Xiao fell to her knees, and she bowed her head, hitting the ground in front of Van. The man was shocked, not understanding why she did it so suddenly. In response, the girl confessed, "Master, I initially joined your sect only in search of treatment." She raised her head, looked at Lin with hatred and added, "But now I am sure that you are capable of avenging my family." Wang immediately realized that Lingyun had done something to Fei Wu. Trembling with anger, she began to tell how she met him during her training. He lusted after her beauty and tried to humiliate her, and the girl ran away from him, thinking that everything was finally over. But when Fei Yu returned home, she learned that Lin had brought experts from the Marcus's estate and had killed hundreds of her family members. The mortally wounded father ordered Fei to run faster. The sobbing girl ran away, saving her life. Gripping the ground furiously with her hands, she added, "If it weren't for my father, I would never have met you." Extending his hand, Wang reassured the girl, "Don't worry, even if you weren't a disciple of our sect, we would still help you." Lin, unable to move under the elder's sword, only looked at them angrily. He dug his fingers into the sand, scooping it into his fist. Throwing a handful of earth to distract attention, the Marcus jumped back. A cry rang out. "Master, Lingyun has escaped." Wang was surprised by this behavior, since usually villains would either resist or beg for mercy. But he told Fei Yu not to worry, as he couldn't escape from Elder Ye. And indeed, Guchen's blade slowly emerged from its sheath. The more he pulled it out, the lighter the immortal's hair became. All the bodies were surrounded by extraordinary magic, lifting them into the air. People began to float above the ground, surrounded by silver light. Leaking and Fei Wu clung to their master, whose cultivation allowed them to not lose face and calmly wonder why the elder was making a show out of every attack. Pushing off from the ground, Guchen rushed into the sky. The floating unconscious bodies became his support, and the man easily moved forward. He appeared right above the fleeing Lingyun, who immediately noticed someone above his head. Streams of power like air flowed around the immortal. The Marquis was hit by a powerful blow from the elder. A sword burning with white light split his face in half. Blood spurted out and a loud scream was heard from Lingyun, who was thrown back by the attack. And Guchen was already putting the blade back into its sheath. And all the lifeless bodies that were hanging in the air thanks to his power fell to the ground with splashes of blood behind the immortal's back. When the Marcus landed on his knees, something fell from his neck. It was a round, green-patterned medallion. Fei Yu immediately noticed something familiar. She rushed forward and caught the pendant in her hands. Lin's body shook with pain and he didn't even notice his loss. All his servants also lay nearby, unable to continue the fight. Elder Yi turned around and explained, "Master said, young Master Lin must stay." Looking at him, Fei Yu realized that this man had exceptional fighting skills, although she didn't think how good he would be. Even if the Marquis himself were here, he would not be able to escape unharmed. With such power, the immortal sect should be famous, but the girl had not heard anything about it. Then Wang interrupted her thought. "I understand. You only wanted to join the sect to protect yourself." Fei Yu couldn't say anything in her defense, she only closed her eyes in embarrassment. But then the man added, "When I said that I would take you as a student, I was absolutely honest. Since my sect is not famous, you can make a decision when you get to know each other better." Of course, the girl was happy with such words, and Van proudly thought that, being a famous animator, he knew how to direct the plot in the right direction. Before the man's eyes appeared Fei Yu's outstretched palms, on which lay a medallion. She said that it was a relic of the Lin family, and the girl wanted to use it as an entrance fee. A joyful Van was about to take the pendant, wondering whether the system would count it. He had nothing to lose, but then he opened his eyes and looked at Fei Yu. She was very sad and thoughtful, and her cheeks were flushed. This made the man freeze and wonder why she was so red, and the girl was simply remembering her past. When her father handed her the pendant asking, "Fei Yu, you've always wanted to get a relic, haven't you?" And he added that she had become quite an adult, so he was giving it to her so that in the future, the pendant would become a symbol of her love. However, the girl had no intention of giving the ancient jade pendant to anyone. While she was indulging in her memories, the master was already examining the medallion. The system congratulated him on achieving mentorship and gave him rewards, a call-up and a lottery. Touching Fei Yu's shoulder, The man tried to get her attention. When she turned around, he began to speak with a smile. "Since you are now part of our sect." And then he added, "Your revenge is our revenge." Pointing to the wounded Lin Wang, he said that he was all hers. The girl's eyes widened in anticipation of revenge. There was a small stick lying on the ground. Fei Yu bent down, picked it up, clutching it tightly in her hand, and walked towards the villain. "You destroyed my family, drowned them in rivers of blood." And Lin only trembled, unable to move or speak. The girl grabbed the stick more tightly, holding it like a sword. And she directed it at the Marquis's son, because she could not be called Lady Lin if she did not take revenge. Having vented all her rage, she hit Lin. Blood spurted from his mouth, but he did not resist. However, Fei Yu continued to speak. "Lingyun, did you ever imagine that day when you took the pendant from me and humiliated me?" She watched him bleed, remembering how powerful the Marquis' son was, subduing the entire world. The girl was filled with anger at the destruction of her family and continued to hit him with a stick. Blood was dripping from the sharp end of the stick. But this did not stop Fei Yu, and she finally thrust the stick even harder. Looking at this, Lycan became worried about his sister's condition. Only the master thought that everything was fine, and she should be allowed to release her anger. Lin still showed no signs of life. His head fell back and he fell to the ground. When the Marquis's son fell, the girl finally came to and froze sitting next to him, thrusting the stick deep into his chest. Wang received a new message from the system. Disciple Ling Fei Wu killed a sage general-level expert and earned 300 sect points. With difficulty, without looking up, the girl pulled the stick out of Lin's body. Her hand, which was leaning on the stick, was covered in blood. Still kneeling, she thanked Elder Ye and Master for helping her take revenge and intended to be a disciple of the immortal sect until her death. Smiling, Wang said, "You will have all the conditions for cultivation. Whether you become a true expert or not will depend on you." He took her bloody hand, and he reminded that the members of the immortal sect know no fear, and, in the name of blood feud, kill even big shots. At first, the girl did not understand his words and looked at him in shock. Gradually, the meaning became clear and tears appeared in her eyes. Grasping the master's hand with both palms, she replied, "I will do everything to meet your expectations." Proud of himself, Van thought that he was truly worthy of the title of mangaka, because he loved to control other people's feelings. However, the man scratched his head and didn't know what he would teach them when he had promised so much, and Fei Yu was not as simple as leeching and couldn't be fooled. And then something hit the girl's scabbard. It was Guchen who grazed them with his blade, asking if she practiced swordsmanship. "Yes, Elder Ye," Fei Yu replied with her hands folded. To the surprise of everyone present, the immortal offered to teach her, and Wang shouted to the girl, "The stones will sooner bloom than the elder will decide to take on a disciple. What are you waiting for?" These words brought the frozen girl to her senses. She immediately fell to her knees, hitting her head on the ground. And she began to thank the master for the honor. Looking at her with an appraising gaze, Guchen said, "Your skills are at a high level, but before we begin training, we need to rid you of your internal injuries." The immortal turned around and walked forward, calling Fei Yu to follow him. Looking back, the girl wanted to ask Van what she should do, but he, with a smile, ordered her to follow the elder. Looking at the people walking into the hut, the man thought that now he had a protector and a talented student that he was going to train. In just one day, his sect began to take shape. Lycan's thoughts were not at all cheerful. He watched with sadness as the younger sister who joined the sect later became the elder's disciple. Being her older brother, the guy could not give in to her. He decided to turn to the master and ask what he should do. Patting the boy on the stomach, Wang admitted, "You need to lose weight first." And stretching out his hand, he pointed to the field in front of the house with the order to clear out the sect's territory. Lycan's face became lifeless, but he had no choice and agreed. While pulling out the grass, the guy remembered how well he was treated before he was accepted into the sect. But after his sister appeared, he seemed to turn into some kind of weed. The weather around was great. The sun was shining and the birds were singing. Leaning against a tree nearby, Wang asked the system to show the characteristics of the sect, wondering what kind of reward for accepting a disciple he would receive this time. It turned out that the maximum number of elders is 5, and if he gets someone else, there will be 3 places left. The man was also interested in what the sect points are for, and she explained, "They allow the hero to receive spins and also give the opportunity to improve the system. With the increase in level, the system will allow you to get even stronger experts, treasures, and students." Wang looked at this with delight, asking how he could earn these points. The system told about 3 ways to get them. The first is to complete missions, the second is to kill enemies, The third is to accept geniuses into the sect, and the higher their talent, the more points. Seeing the third point, the man thought it was a mistake, because Lingfei could be considered a real genius, but he did not receive additional points for her entry, to which the system said, "The girl really has the qualifications, but she does not have the physical data and understanding of the levels." This made Wang feel the difference between geniuses and ordinary cultivators, and he wondered if he could be considered a genius. "The hero has average qualifications, but considering the system, you can be called a first-class talent," the system replied. Yawning, Wang decided to find out about Leaking's strength, but checking his qualifications cost 100 sect points. This amount of points for checking an ordinary person angered the man, but he had to agree, and the system began to download information about him. After a few seconds, she said, "This young man can be considered one of the strongest representatives of the peak devil level." At first, Van thought he read something wrong, but the words remained the same, and the shocked man turned around. Only his trembling back was visible above the ground. With great effort, Lycan tore up the weeds in the clearing. Finally tearing out the grass, he plopped down on the ground. Looking at this, Wang could not believe how he was able to rise to the highest rank. However, the system never made a mistake and said, "The disciple has the complexion of an immortal spiritual turtle, but he has not activated it yet." Stopping her, the man asked what this complexion was, and the system explained, "The black turtle set has abilities related to absolute protection and longevity." She also added that if he does not die, everything will be fine with him, even if the whole world grows old. His lifespan is unlimited, and his protection is perfect. Liking licked the wounds on his hands, and Wang looked dumbfounded at this fat man, who didn't even know what a terrifying build he had, and could even become immortal. The man knew he had to help the boy cultivate, and asked the system how this could be done. And the program decided to show what Litzin is currently doing, having woven something out of weeds. He looked into this round thing like a mirror and asked, "Mirror, my light, tell me who is the strongest on the entire continent." And looking inside, he strained his face and said in a different voice that the strongest was Lyson. Smiling, he blushed and praised the mirror's awareness. Seeing this, Van was overcome with anger. He clenched his fist, and even the system asked if he didn't deserve a beating. Of course, the man was surprised how beating the guy was connected with the activation of the complex. But the program reported that the turtle's complex is activated precisely by beating. This method was unexpected and amazed Van. The system then explained in more detail that the build requires constant blows. This is necessary to stimulate the full awakening of the bloodline. The man was pleased with such an easy way because if he had to get the treasure, he most likely would not have been able to cope. And as long as they don't kill Litzin, he'll be fine with his build. While the young man was playing with the grass, a strange wind blew. He held his Panama hat, wondering why it had suddenly become so cold. Looking through the grass at the sky, he asked the mirror what was there. The recently clear sky was suddenly covered with clouds. A huge hurricane arose and lightning flashed. The guy grabbed the approaching master, asking what kind of hurricane it was, and he reassured him, "Don't worry, everything is under control." And he himself decided to check with the system where such a storm was coming from. She explained, "Disciple Fei Wu is going to advance to the level of a sage general, and this is a sign of promotion," which was a pleasant surprise for Wang, and he told Litzin that it was his younger sister who was advancing. This news shocked the guy. This girl not only became a disciple of the strongest elder, but also managed to advance to the next level. Out of envy, he began to chew grass, because if this continued, Lycan would lose his authority as an older brother. But then his plump cheek was squeezed with fingers and he was told not to be upset. The master was confident that if they started training tomorrow and the boy could hold out, he would overtake Feiyu in the blink of an eye. Having said thank you, the happy guy assured Van that he would definitely endure everything. The man flicked his cheek and said, "I believe in you and your body." The storm grew stronger, and Wang assured, "Our sect is waiting for your future advancement. Let it cause a real stir." In fact, the hurricane was visible far from the forest. A scarlet column of light struck a high slope nearby. There appeared a strange creature resembling a man in armor, with claws instead of nails and pointed ears. He chuckled, not expecting that after 100 years of sleep, his first snack would be a wise general. And he considered it a great honor for such a person to become dinner. The monster stepped on the rock with force, destroying it. Pushing off, he rushed forward at great speed. Only a red glare remained behind the hungry monster. The huge mountain was illuminated red, and the air around it began to form circles. From the force of the monster's blow, the rock exploded and instantly shattered into pieces. Meanwhile, the hurricane did not subside above the roof of the immortal sect, but only shone brighter and brighter blue. And then the lightning gathered into one cluster and flew down. It was as if the entire hurricane had entered the interior of a small house. When the sky finally became clear, Feiyu finally appeared from the hut. Her body was enveloped in lightning, and the system congratulated Wang by awarding him 1,000 sect points. The happy man smiled. This girl was a real genius. Now she was just one level below him. The beauty folded her hands and thanked the master for the opportunity. Lycan chewed on his teacher's sleeve with envy, thinking that he could reach the introductory phase in just 1 year. Continue to follow Elder Ye. I hope you will continue to glorify the name of our sect, the man instructed, and Feiyu happily agreed. But then Guchen felt something was wrong. A voice came from somewhere. At first, it seemed to me that there was only one general here. I didn't expect there would be more. A strange creature with glowing scarlet eyes appeared behind Van. The master immediately ordered the system to check it. Despite the cost of 100 points, knowing your enemy was very important, and judging by his aura, the elder might not be able to handle him. And the program informed, "This is the great demon Xuanxia who destroyed the empire 1,000 years ago. Then he was at the peak of the level of a wise monarch, but the emperor defeated and sealed him. The system then added that he had broken the seal quite recently and was now at the peak of the aristocratic level. With relief, Wang thought how lucky they were that the demon was not at the peak of his powers. Otherwise, Guchen would not have been able to defeat him. Suddenly, Liking stepped forward and said, "How dare you insult my clan? Get out of here immediately. Otherwise, the elder will kill you." The monster grinned and remembered seeing the name of the divine immortal sect on the hut, but he had never heard of it. And the tone in which the fat man spoke to him made him lose his temper. The elder and master were surprised by the courage of the youth who insulted the demon at the peak of the aristocrat level. Feiyu walked up to Liking and whispered, "This man's aura is not inferior to the master, he is at least an aristocrat." The monster made a circle with his thumb and index finger and looked at the girl with a keen gaze. Smiling, he thought he was truly creepy. However, this did not frighten the boy because his teacher was here, and he said to Lyson, "The introductory phase for a year, the wise monarch for 3 years, so it was only a matter of time before he became stronger." But the demon didn't think Van's skills were that strong. The guy leaned back, provoking the demon even more. "Little bug, how dare you come to our sect and make a fool of yourself? Fall on your face and accept your death." He looked at the upside-down monster, which no longer seemed so scary. Sweat was pouring down Xuanxia's face, and he was barely able to restrain himself from slapping the talkative fat man. Turning his head over, Lyson moved his whole body, teasing the demon. Seeing this, Van began to understand why he had the build of a turtle, because the guy was so annoying. The angry monster challenged the boy's teacher to a fight because he didn't want to get his hands dirty. The calm Wang asked Guchen to delay Xuanxia for a bit so that he could remove him. The elder only nodded in response. And then the man ordered the system to use the summons. A ball of power sparkled on the demon's raised hand, and he asked if he was really that Elder Ye from the immortal sect. Guchen stood calmly in front of him, not intending to answer the question. From above, Xuanxia's hand was covered by an unusual force, turning into a huge paw, repeating the movements of his hand. He was curious about how this cultivator would finish him off, but he wasn't going to wait and extended his hand to attack the elder. He was also not so simple and pulled out a shining golden sword from its sheath. Guchen swung it and destroyed the enemy's blow with one hand, but that was not the end. The demon's power engulfed the entire column of light around the elder. It was aimed at the very heart, at the cultivator's body, which was overflowing with power. He watched with concern as the ring of demonic power tightened around him. It was as if a huge hand had grabbed Guchen in a fist, leaving only his head. The demon thought that the elder would be strong, but it turned out that catching him was as easy as pie. Feiyu approached the master and, pulling him by the sleeve, asked him to save her teacher. However, Wang remained calm and advised not to underestimate the elder, because such a demon would not be able to catch him. And indeed, the golden light emanating from the cultivator penetrated into the hand holding it. In a panic, I couldn't figure out what was happening, and the light gradually grew, filling more and more space inside the monster's power. The rays shone brightly and passed through, reaching his hand. The light ripped through the demon's scarlet aura, tearing it apart. And now an alien golden force strikes the monster's hand. A huge beam of light knocks down Xuanxia, sending him to the ground. He manages to hook his hand with his nails while plowing the field. The demon's legs and arms sent streaks across the ground, but he managed to stay on his feet, and the elder had already easily descended down. And he walked towards the enemy, waving his sword. Xuanxia wondered if he had a hidden source of energy. He raised his hand, Feeling the pain and realizing how well-honed Guchen's sword technique was, there was a huge wound on the palm that extended almost to the elbow. His strength had not yet left him and the monster growled, surrounding his entire body with a red aura. With her help, he pushed off and flew into the air, leaving behind the frozen Elder E. But the demon had not yet gone far when Lycan's voice was heard. "You are trying to escape because you cannot cope with him." Grimacing, he exclaimed, "You are trying to escape from me. Don't think that you can leave the immortal sect unharmed." A hate-filled scream was the monster's response to this. He decided to use his special move if the guy continued to talk. However, from somewhere a blow landed on Litzin's cheek. Lying on the ground, he raised his head asking the master why he was hit, and he replied, "Oh, it looks like you had a mosquito on your face." Van really wanted to beat the fat man, despite the fact that they were on the same team. Squeezing his wounded hand, the demon warned the elder, "Once I remove the seal, you will be the first to fully satisfy my appetite." His whole body was turning into a stream of power, and the monster was going to show how scary he was when he was hungry. A huge hand appeared above the elder, literally blocking the sky. The demon was ready to tear him to pieces. His strength was enormous and he was already ready to grab Guchen. An excited Feiyu called out to her master, grabbing the sword. She wanted to help him. But he wasn't going to give up and his blade was still full of power. Using the air currents, the elder easily jumped up and stayed in the air. His aura swirled, supporting his body in flight, and the blade turned into a golden beam, cutting through everything in its path. The elder struck the very center of the huge palm, and the power spread out from it in waves, hitting the demon. Such power caused a real earthquake, lifting rocks and uprooting trees. Feiyu barely managed to grab Lixing. The clash of two opposing forces caused a real apocalypse. But this could not continue for long. Soon everything died down, leaving only a light smoke in front of the sect's house. Stunned, Wang and Feiyu peered out from behind the door with curiosity. The entire gorge, where there used to be rocks and trees, was leveled to the ground, and only their hut remained intact. Guchen and Xuansha landed on the ground at the same time. Looking closely at the enemy, the demon felt that he was only slightly weaker than him, and if he tried hard, he could win. But there was someone else in his mind who would surely be able to understand if the monster removed the seal, and then he would have to run. He decided to call it a day, wait for a full recovery, and then continue the battle. However, Elder Ye said, "I'm afraid you won't be able to leave." The demon grinned and admitted, "You are the most powerful man I have ever met in the Empire, but you still can't keep me here." And then Guchen's sword clanged into its sheath. Turning around, the cultivator replied, "The sect leader only said to detain you. Someone else will have to deal with you later." As he left the house, Wang smiled and said, "Oh, it seems he's here." Raising his hand, Xuansha was surprised who it was, noticing the falling snow. The elder bowed his head. Before that, he did not know who it would be. But now, listening to the sword, he realized something. Guchen's eternal enemy stepped quietly and carefully onto the ground. It was a man with long dark hair and a sword on his back. And the name of this man with lifeless eyes was the sword god Jimin Piaoxue. The demon turned around in horror, feeling how strong the cultivator was that made even Elder Ye tremble. He had no chance to attack or retreat. Of all the options, Xuansha chose the safest one and decided to flee. The sword god slowly raised his palm and blue flames lit up on two of his fingers. With a wave of his hand, he directed the flames straight into the back of the fleeing demon. Time seemed to stand still when the monster felt pain. The blow hit the neck and blood spurted from the deep cut. He pressed his fingers against the wound, trying to stop the blood that was leaking through his fingers. Blood stains remained on something invisible. An invisible sword emerged from two of Seaman's fingers, and now a scarlet liquid was flowing down it. Sitting on his knees, Xuansha was surprised. A sword that has no reflection in shape, made of light, carrying death within itself. What kind of technique is this? Raising his fingers, the sword god explained that he had merely waved his blade carelessly. It wasn't even a technique, let alone something to call it. He scattered the sword, shaking off the blood spatter. The two sword gods stood side by side, surrounded by slowly falling snow. Guchen gripped his sword tightly as he looked at his sworn enemy, and he calmly looked at the elder, not intending to attack. Looking at this meeting, Wang didn't expect that this time, Ye Gucheng's only opponent would appear. Both of them had reached the point where they only had swords in their hearts. However, the system states that Guchen should be stronger than Seaman. The sword god summoned this time achieved great success in swordsmanship after the battle on the Purple Peak. His skill has reached such a level that everything in the world can be his sword. Now everything became clear to Van, because he heard that the title of Spiritual Emperor was considered one of the best in the Yari Empire. Meanwhile, Elder Ye extended his sword forward. After the battle in the Forbidden City, "I didn't expect to meet you again," he said to Simon. However, he pushed Guchen's blade aside with 2 fingers, and he said, "First, reach the level of the spiritual emperor, then we can fight." The shocked elder didn't expect that they wouldn't fight right now, but he decided that they could agree on this. Placing his fist against his palm, the sword god turned to face Wang. Bowing his head slightly, he said, "Goodbye, master. I have to go." And the demon was still alive. Kneeling down, he was deep in thought. If he fights with Elder Ye, he will definitely be able to get out of here. In the battle with the sword god Seaman, the monster could also come up with something. However, if the mysterious patriarch decided to act, he would definitely not survive. Xuanxia did not know how strong this master was, but even the spiritual emperor treated him with respect. Smiling, he said, "Because this devil is destined to fall today." And again using the scarlet hand, he directed it at Lyson, adding, "I will take with me those who most deserve punishment." The guy started crying, screaming that he was just a mortal, and the demon was so strong and still, decided to attack the weak. Fei Yu, who was standing nearby, saw more, and trying to calm him down, shouted that everything was fine. And indeed, the scarlet aura in the form of a hand did not have time to grab Litzen, because Guchen had already pulled out his sword. Using his powers, he lifted the young man into the air. He turned around in shock. It turned out that the demon had managed to slightly touch him, cutting his pants and underwear. Xuanxia was in a panic because he hoped to capture the weakest of them. The elder's blade was once again in the sheath, sealing its power. And the guy fell from a height, hitting the ground. Now that he knew how strong the immortal sect was, but he was still mortal and could die in dangerous situations, the young man was no longer going to be so careless. Again, 2 of Semyon's fingers flashed with a misty white light. He found himself right behind the demon and pressed them to the back of his head. The sword, God's gaze, was as impassive as ever, as he asked the patriarch what to do with the enemy. Raising 2 fingers, Wang explained that he was giving Xuanxia 2 options. The first is to join a sect and donate all your money to it, and the second is to become fertilizer for plants. The focused man hoped to add the great demon to the clan to earn more points, and at the same time see how evil he was. The monster did not appreciate such a proposal, growling, "Devils need to be killed, not humiliated." Hearing this, Lycan smiled and exclaimed, "Patriarch, he chose the second option." The young man had already seen himself burying his body in the ground and urinating on it while taking care of the flowers. Annoyed, Wang clenched his fist, preparing to help him practice the turtle body. But before he could do anything, the blow finally caught up with Litzen. The fat man clutched his cheek and asked why his younger sister hit him. The girl didn't think long and answered that it was a mosquito on her face. Having taken a ring from the grass, the guy began to look for mosquitoes that constantly suck his delicious blood. Unable to bear all this mockery, the demon screamed madly. But Van wasn't at all scared by this, and he smiled slightly. Coming closer to Xuanxia, he touched a protruding strand of his hair, and stroking him as if he were a wild animal, he began to persuade him. "I know you are arrogant and proud, but you can join us for just a year. And if then I cannot persuade you to stay, you can leave." Xuanxia didn't expect such a strange proposal. An oppressive silence hung over the clearing as everyone waited for the demon's answer, and he suddenly stamped his feet loudly. A fire lit up the monster's eyes as he repeated that devils should be killed, not humiliated. However, the blow did not go any further, and kneeling down, he extended his hands towards Van. In his palms lay a rather heavy bag of money. The man was a little confused, but he realized that although Xuanxia talked a lot, his body was in excellent condition. The system immediately congratulated and awarded the master 10,000 points and a random summon. Wang was delighted. He did not expect such a high reward and was going to take advantage of every opportunity to hire strong people. Looking at the demon, he asked, "What did you mean when you talked about food?" Now that Wang had received Xuanxia's money, he didn't know what to do with him and decided to kill him if he was really dangerous. The question seemed to confuse the demon and he coughed trying to answer. Finally, the smiling monster admitted, "This is one of my hobbies. I just scare people, but I don't eat them." The stunned man asked the system if this was really true, and she, surprisingly, immediately confirmed it. At first, the head of the sect and the demon simply stood opposite each other, looking at each other. But soon they laughed with a strange, artificial laugh. Wang still couldn't understand why the monster who was the spiritual emperor was intimidating others, since Xuanxia really didn't intend to kill anyone, and the man decided not to tell that he wanted to destroy him. The 2 strange creatures, the demon and the man, continued to laugh. Looking at this, Fei Yu was at a loss as to how the patriarch could force the great demon to join the sect with just a few words. but Leaking was sure that it was because he was a master of his craft. Seeing everyone standing like a pillar, Van called them to follow him. The girl became interested in where everyone was being invited. Standing at the threshold of the tiny hut, he replied, "Naturally, to the real residents of the immortal sect." The students immediately became enthusiastic, as if Fei Yu had known that the residence was not a straw house. Standing nearby, Xuanxia realized that he had accidentally provoked the ancient hidden sect. Otherwise, how could a spiritual general and a spiritual emperor coexist in such a hut? The demon wanted to look at this divine sect and find out what was hidden in it. And so they all went inside, closing the door. Wang sighed heavily and smiled thoughtfully. The space was very small and everyone had to huddle close to each other, feeling awkward. They started pushing each other, trying to move away and complaining about each other. Here the patriarch extended his hand, on which a golden light appeared, and ordered the system to open. A beautiful golden seal with writing appeared in his palm, and the entire space seemed to become rippled. The students stared at the amazing bright light with their mouths open and could not believe their eyes. A huge golden wall towered before them. Xuanxia couldn't utter a word and only thought in horror as to why this sect was located in the secret realm, and how powerful the patriarch was to have placed the clan there. The secret kingdom is hard to find on the Xianling continent, and if someone is near it, they might even die. Because only those above the level of spiritual deity can open it, the kingdom holds many treasures left by deities. However, the demon could not understand how the divine sect managed to get there. He concluded that the sect was founded by a spiritual deity and that they had inherited his legacy. And if Xuanxia could seize this inheritance, the patriarch was the first to go forward, easily stepping over the golden wall and disappearing behind it. As he entered, he closed his eyes, feeling the air change. And finally, he looked around, raising his gaze upward. It was a huge, majestic castle decorated with gold, to which flat stones hanging in the air led. Fei Wu and Liking looked around in admiration, while the elder and sword god standing behind them remained unperturbed. And the demon only thought that the divine immortal sect was worthy of its title. Confidently leading everyone, Van was the first to step onto the floating stones. Finally, they found themselves in front of a huge castle. Turning around, the master told everyone to choose any room for themselves, and also allowed them to look around, but warned them about dangerous areas. The disciples obeyed the patriarch of their sect without question, and the man pushed the door with force with his hands. Inside was a huge hall with rows of chairs on the sides and a single throne in the center. This throne, a high throne, was clearly intended for the head of the sect. Understanding this, Van climbed in and sat down in it, crossing his legs. The master squinted as he looked around the room, thinking about the future. He wanted this entire hall to soon be filled with divine beings, then giving the system the order to use random summoning. The program congratulated the player on the summoning of the Flower Palace's ruler, Yao Yue. The man tugged at his cheek and was surprised because he had summoned the most beautiful girl in the world. A happy Wang asked to show him Yao Yue's characteristics. The system immediately showed the information. She is a character from a martial arts novel, the ruler of the Flower Palace. Her skills are on par with the strongest sword warrior. She is the strongest among girls, and is at the stage of a spiritual emperor. The man's eyes sparkled with joy. This girl was very powerful and worthy of being called number one. Here, all around, small white flowers began to shine. A strange, blurry blue circle appeared at the top of the ceiling. First, a graceful foot in a high-heeled shoe appeared from there, and now the beautiful, inspired face of the beauty appeared. Gradually, a girl of unearthly beauty appeared under the ceiling, with her hair gathered in the shape of a crescent moon. Van even thought that there was someone so beautiful in the world. Yao Yue landed nimbly on the floor, tapping her heel lightly, and she looked at Van completely calmly, with impenetrable dark eyes. The still delighted man could not believe that he was seeing the most beautiful girl in the world in front of him. Her clothes highlighted her slender figure, and Wang was still in shock from her beauty. A Yao Yue placed her fist on her palm and bowed elegantly. While greeting the patriarch, she did not lose a drop of her grace. The master was delighted that the most beautiful girl in the world of martial arts bowed before him. He asked her to be less formal, because from now on she was on his side. "Yes, patriarch," the beauty replied, still completely emotionless. She extended her hand, around which ice flowers sparkled, leaning on one of the thrones. Yao Yu tucked her legs under her and sat on the throne, surrounded by icy flower branches. There was an incredible coldness coming from her. Even Van felt it and sneezed. He decided to let the girl go and ordered her to wait for him outside. Standing in front of the man, she obeyed without complaint. Dissolving into a stream of white fog and ice, The master, left alone, finally sat on the throne again. Hugging his knees, he trembled all over from the cold in the room. Yao Yue's martial arts were frightening. Even though she did it unconsciously, he still felt uneasy around her. Meanwhile, there was silence in the courtyard of the residence. The rays of the sun illuminated the spacious corridors of the palace, penetrating into the room through the open door. And then a white light flashed, penetrating into the empty room. When the door slammed shut, Xuanxia came out from the next room. Looking at the sky, he thought, since this is an ancient hidden sect, there should be several masters in it. Where are the rest then? He decided to take a look in the next room, thinking that the immortal sect was just a dummy. However, when his foot was inside, he felt a terrible cold. The demon looked in horror at the limb that was covered in frost. He didn't understand why it was so cold inside the room. While he was thinking, Xuanxia's leg was covered with a layer of ice with small flowers. Unable to stand on one leg for long, he fell right in the passage. The door opened slightly, and the demon saw a girl sitting on the sofa. Surrounded by ice, she was incredibly beautiful and calmly threatened. If you dare enter again, you will die. There was an endless coldness in her eyes. The girl was really ready to kill him. The frightened demon instantly jumped out and the door slammed behind him. Xuanxia breathed heavily and realized that it was another spiritual emperor. It was completely quiet around. It seemed like all the great powers of the sect had simply fallen asleep. And the monster realized that he had awakened this lady after entering her. Exploring these rooms, the demon could really find his death. Xuanxia stood up on one leg with difficulty and was angry with himself because he was actually scared when she looked at him. However, even so, he still remained alive. And now he had to touch her thighs. Otherwise, he couldn't sleep peacefully. A new day had dawned. And in the morning, the palace was still quiet. Only Feiyu had already stood up and was sighing with a sad face. Litzin, to whom she came, looked at the girl in surprise. "Junior, what did you want?" he asked. Unexpectedly taking him by the cheek, Feiyu called the guy senior. And having apologized, she hit him hard on the cheek. This caused the young man's full body to turn around and blood to spurt out. He landed with a thud on the floor of his room. The entire palace seemed to shake from such noise. Lying without signs of life, Litzin frightened the girl and she wanted to go up to him and check on him. But the next moment, the young man suddenly stood up, frightening Feiyu. His eyes were running down his cheeks and he was holding his cheek, trying to find out what was going on. The girl looked at the completely intact guy with surprise, realizing that the patriarch had not lied. He really did have a strong physique, because she had used 1/10 of her strength. Feiyu replied, "I'm doing this for your own good," which shocked Licking beyond belief. And he even asked, "You hit me for my own good?" The guy was sure that the girl hit him because he would soon take the top position and she was eliminating the competitor. However, Feiyu admitted, "The patriarch asked me to fight you until I killed you. He said that you have incredible talent." Licken clutched his head and was in a panic. How could he not know about his strength? The young man even thought that maybe he had said something wrong or had somehow insulted the patriarch. His sister looked at his worries with a smile. But the next moment she became serious, claiming that the guy really did have incredible strength. It was hard to believe, and Lyson wondered why he was still mortal if geniuses could easily increase their cultivation. To this, Feiyu had a response. "Because your power has not yet been activated." The young man immediately wanted to know how to activate it. The girl, foaming at his foot, admitted that blows were needed to awaken strength. The blow made his face wrinkle and he only groaned in shock. Leaning against the wall and crying, the boy could not understand. Why isn't the patriarch doing this? The girl revealed this secret with a smile. He is afraid that he will kill you with one blow, so he told her to hit Lyson. Power flowed through Feiyu's hand, and the young man curled up into a ball in fear. The sounds of blows and cries of, "Be gentle, little one, stop hitting her," were heard throughout the castle. Just then Van went out for a walk and heard piercing screams. He squinted and smiled, happy that the younger one was helping the older one, so Litzin would really soon gain strength and become a genius. The man stretched, thinking how he would have beaten the guy himself if it weren't for his status as a patriarch, and cries for help were still heard behind him. And somewhere far away in the clouds on the mountainside, the Lingxiao Valley was hidden. There was silence all around, but it seemed that there was someone in one of the pavilions. There was a sign above the entrance stating that this was the building of the Lingyun sect. Inside, many cultivators were gathered, sitting around an incense burner. At the head of the gathering was a venerable elderly man, the sect's patriarch, Chen Feng. The man sitting next to him, who was also older, warned the leader that the demon sealing meeting was about to begin. Then, the great elder of the sect, Xu Wanfeng, added, "Young Lord Chen Xin will not be able to reach the level of spiritual emperor anytime soon. I'm afraid our sect will not be able to participate in the meeting this time. Basically, the Lingyun sect was like a nursing home. Some were sleeping with eye masks on, and some were brushing their false teeth. However, their patriarch considered the sealing of demons to be a very important event, and their sect had to take part in it no matter what. This meeting could allow the Lingyun sect to enter the Yari Academy, and so they were obliged to participate in it. To this, the elders said, this time they issued a decree that only the young generation can participate in the meeting, and our youth is only at the middle stage of spiritual mediumship. How can we fight with the geniuses of other sects? Everyone sighed heavily and immediately began to think about what they should do. And then Chen Feng suddenly came up with something. Jumping up from his seat, he asked if anything had happened recently on the outskirts of the Xinyao mountain range. Wan Feng recalled, the Lin family was destroyed by Marquis Lin and the young lady fled to the outskirts. The Marquis pursued her, but we don't know anything else. The elder also added that the Lin family was connected with the highest officials in the empire, and it was not worth getting involved in this. And now no one could contact Miss Lin. However, the man remembered something else that interested the patriarch. Yesterday, in the valley on the edge of the Xinyao mountain range, there was a spirit general's aura, and according to the disciples, the aura burst out, Wan Feng said. This made the head think about the young cultivator who could break through to the stage of a spiritual general on the outskirts of the ridge. But the elder did not know the truth because the disciple was afraid to come closer, and Chen Feng had an idea to let this strange genius take part in sealing the demons instead of their sect's disciple so that they could win. Everyone immediately admired the genius of the patriarch, but Wan Feng was not so sure and suggested that perhaps he was a disciple of a larger sect. Having thought everything over, the patriarch ordered that if he was a disciple of a large sect, he should be left alone. But then Chen Feng's face changed and he added, if he is from a small sect, then we will destroy the clan and take him hostage. The elder completely agreed with the master's plan. Meanwhile, in the secret realm of the divine immortal sect, everything was peaceful. Using 10,000 points, Wang performed 10 draws and obtained 1/10 of Yao Yue cultivation, a new sword technique, 1/5 of Jimen cultivation, another sword technique, 2/10 of Yao Yue cultivation, and the brightness of jade technique. Delighted with such awards, the man ordered that they all be applied to him. His body was enveloped in a bright light, and all the rewards in the form of yellow rays entered the player's body. He stood with his eyes closed, feeling the power increase. Soon everything came to an end, and smiling, Wang looked forward. The first thing the master decided to do was to test his new skills. A blue, transparent sword lit up on his fingers, and imitating the elder, he swung the blade. Further into the air, more blades appeared. There were more and more of them. The swords turned into a single sharp peak. This is what the sacred sword of Tao looked like. The man then used the Yao Yue technique and an ice flower sparkled between his fingers. As he threw it forward, huge blocks of ice began to grow on the ground. Eventually, Wang landed lightly on top of his throne and watched as the ice flows shattered into pieces. Now he could confidently call himself the leader of the divine immortal sect. And outside, a small hut standing in the middle of an open area had already attracted attention. It was the elder of the Lingyun sect who sensed the aura of a primordial stage spirit general here. Descending from the mountain, he came closer to the straw house, and he read the inscription on the door, Divine Immortal Sect. Such a loud name angered him, because even the Lingyun sect, the largest on the ridge, did not dare to call itself that. How could a simple hut afford such a name? He believed that they were truly seeking death. But suddenly something strange happened. The wall of the house began to fall apart before our eyes, and from there, a huge red fist appeared, aiming at the surprised Wan Feng. He looked at it in horror, not having time to take a step. The fist had already crashed into the elder's body, pushing him further and further. The scarlet hand, having captured the enemy, stretched out to the nearest mountain and crashed into it. But it didn't end there. The aura sharpened and went deeper into the stone. It dug deeper and deeper, piercing the mountain right through. So the old man found himself stuck inside the rock. A ton of rock crushed him, and Wan Feng screamed in pain. Trying to move and get out, he cursed at his enemy. "How dare you? I am the great elder of the Lingyun sect. I will make you suffer." And then someone landed next to him. It was Zhuansha and Wang, who didn't even know of such a sect, and asked, "Tell me, why did you insult my divine immortal sect?" Wan Feng, who was sticking out from the stone, was surprised that they were from this sect, not understanding how such a hut could accommodate such powerful experts, since only cultivators above the introductory phase could injure him.